For decades, Tom Hanks has been treated as Hollywood's moral compass, the actor audiences trust, the man studios rely on, the figure critics rarely question. His performances feel safe, his public image feels reassuring, and his reputation seems almost immune to scandal. But behind that carefully protected image, there is another story, one built on quiet resentment, professional fractures, and people who walked away with very different memories of working with him. This is not about gossip or exaggeration. This is about the names that keep coming up and the tension that never quite disappeared. The image that cast a shadow. Tom Hanks did not become America's dad by accident. By the late 80s and early 90s, his career had shifted decisively away from broad comedy into emotionally upright, morally centered roles. Studios discovered that his presence lowered risk. Audiences trusted him instinctively. When a project needed credibility, warmth, or reassurance, his name carried weight that few actors could match. But that same reliability also changed how power flowed around him, and not everyone benefited from that shift. One of the earliest fractures that still lingers traces back to the production of Turner and Hooch. Henry Winkler, already an established figure in Hollywood, had been hired as the director. Within days of filming, he was dismissed and replaced. Officially, no detailed explanation was ever offered. Unofficially, industry chatter pointed to a clash in working styles. Winkler was known for a looser, actor-friendly approach, while Hanks was developing a reputation for precision, preparation, and control over tone. According to multiple accounts from people connected to the production, tensions surfaced during early location scouting, where small social moments created larger impressions about hierarchy and authority on set. Winkler later addressed the situation with humor, but his comments suggested unresolved disagreement rather than closure. Tom Hanks, as he has done repeatedly in similar situations, never publicly responded. As Hanks's influence grew, similar patterns appeared elsewhere. On Toy Story, a franchise that became one of the most profitable and culturally dominant animated series in history, his position was unmistakable. Insiders over the years have pointed out that Tim Allen's presence and narrative importance gradually diminished across the films. Allen himself has hinted at discomfort, and multiple reports claim he refused to record dialogue in the same room as Hanks, choosing separation rather than collaboration. Whether driven by jealousy, creative frustration, or perceived imbalance of respect, the result was a partnership that worked on screen but fractured quietly behind the scenes. The careers that collided quietly. Not all resentment toward Tom Hanks was born from arguments or dismissals. Some of it came from something far more corrosive in Hollywood: missed opportunities, near misses, and the uncomfortable feeling of being measured against someone the industry had already chosen as its ideal. In the early 80s, both Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise were still shaping their identities. One was drifting toward sincerity and emotional accessibility, the other toward intensity and edge. When the lead role in Risky Business was being cast, Hanks was reportedly considered. The project's tone, however, did not align with the wholesome image that studios were already beginning to associate with him. The role went to Cruise instead, and it changed everything. That film launched Cruise into a new stratosphere, while Hanks pivoted in a different direction entirely. Years later, the pattern repeated with Jerry Maguire. Cameron Crowe initially envisioned Hanks for the part, but Hanks declined to focus on directing That Thing You Do. Cruise stepped in again and delivered one of the defining performances of his career. Neither actor ever acknowledged tension publicly, yet the repeated intersections, moments where one stepped away and the other rose, kept rumors alive. Hollywood has a long memory, and so do actors. Leonardo DiCaprio's experience followed a different but equally telling path. When Catch Me, If You Can entered production, DiCaprio was in the middle of transforming his image, shedding the remnants of teen idol status. Hanks, by contrast, was already an institution with a direct line to Steven Spielberg and the full confidence of the studio system. Behind the scenes, insiders later suggested that DiCaprio often felt like the junior partner in a collaboration where authority, trust, and attention naturally flowed toward Hanks. The film succeeded, but the imbalance reportedly reinforced DiCaprio's determination to avoid being overshadowed again. In the years that followed, his career choices became increasingly aggressive, deliberately distancing himself from roles that could place him beside figures with immovable stature. Anne Hathaway's rumored discomfort came from a similar place. At industry events and professional gatherings, she was often introduced as an emerging talent standing next to a legend. According to people familiar with those interactions, what was intended as warmth or mentorship sometimes landed as condescension. Hathaway, working intensely to assert her seriousness and independence, reportedly found the dynamic suffocating rather than supportive. Over time, her distance became noticeable. No confrontation followed, just absence. When safe became an accusation. As Tom Hanks's reputation solidified, criticism began to shift away from individual incidents and toward what he symbolized. For a growing number of filmmakers and actors, Hanks no longer represented a colleague or even a competitor. He represented a system, one that rewarded comfort, predictability, and emotional reassurance over risk. Quentin Tarantino never attacked Tom Hanks personally, but his words cut just as deeply. In multiple interviews over the years, Tarantino criticized what he described as Hollywood's addiction to safe storytelling. Without naming Hanks directly at first, the implication was unmistakable. He framed certain actors as avatars of sugar-coated Americana, performers whose presence signaled that nothing truly unsettling would happen. Eventually, Tarantino became more explicit, describing Hanks as the face of an industry that avoids danger and challenges audiences only within carefully controlled boundaries. To Tarantino, this was not merely a difference in taste. It was a creative failure. Hanks's popularity, in his view, discouraged studios from financing stories that might provoke discomfort or moral ambiguity. Hanks never responded. His silence allowed the criticism to linger without confrontation, reinforcing the idea that he stood above such debates. Joaquin Phoenix's rumored disdain came from a more personal philosophical divide. Phoenix has long rejected traditional celebrity culture, avoiding promotional circuits and expressing visible discomfort with performative likability. In contrast, Hanks excels at it. Sources close to award season events described interactions between the two as polite but distant, marked by minimal conversation and a noticeable lack of warmth. Phoenix reportedly viewed Hanks as manufactured, not insincere in intention, but emblematic of a system that prizes approachability over authenticity. Whether Phoenix truly hated Hanks or simply what he represented is unclear, but the contrast between their public personas became impossible to ignore. One leaned into silence and discomfort, the other mastered reassurance. Shia LaBeouf's frustration was more blunt. Known for volatile honesty and erratic behavior, LaBeouf has openly criticized Hollywood's preference for familiarity. According to people who have worked with him, he frequently dismissed the industry's reliance on figures like Hanks, arguing that studios hide behind dependable names instead of nurturing innovation. In private conversations, LaBeouf reportedly referred to performances like Hanks's as monotone safety nets, suggesting that they flattened storytelling rather than expanded it. For LaBeouf, the issue was generational. Actors like Hanks had become institutionalized comfort, while younger performers were expected to compete for relevance without ever threatening that stability. Laughter that cut too close. Comedians tend to say out loud what others only think privately. And when Tom Hanks's image reached near mythical status, it was inevitable that humor would turn into critique. Bill Murray's rumored tension with Hanks dates back to the early days of their parallel rises in Hollywood. Both emerged from comedy, but their styles could not have been more different. Hanks leaned into warmth and emotional accessibility. Murray embraced unpredictability, irony, and discomfort. Industry veterans recall that Murray viewed Hanks's persona as overly calculated, while Hanks reportedly found Murray's erratic behavior unprofessional. Over the years, Murray has occasionally taken subtle shots during interviews, speaking dismissively about actors who play it safe and avoid real risk. He never named Hanks directly, but the implication rarely escaped audiences. Hanks, true to pattern, remained silent, allowing the contrast to define itself. Ricky Gervais was far less subtle. Known for weaponizing award show stages, Gervais built entire monologues around dismantling Hollywood's self-congratulation. During one Golden Globe appearance, he mocked the industry's obsession with moral authority and wholesome branding, using figures like Hanks as shorthand for manufactured virtue. While the jokes were framed as satire, insiders suggested Gervais's frustration ran deeper. He has frequently criticized what he calls performative decency, the idea that likability substitutes for honesty. For Gervais, Hanks embodied a system where image mattered more than truth. Whether the animosity was personal or ideological hardly mattered. The effect was the same. Public doubt seeded through laughter. Chelsea Handler's critiques came wrapped in sarcasm rather than stand-up routines. She once joked that Hanks was everyone's dad but nobody's friend, a line that lingered far longer than a punchline normally would. Handler has openly criticized Hollywood's dependence on familiar, reassuring faces, arguing that it crowds out bolder voices. According to people close to her, she views Hanks as the ultimate safe investment, the actor studios turn to when they want applause without resistance. Her remarks ignited debate, with some praising her honesty and others accusing her of attacking a beloved icon. Hanks again declined to engage. Moral authority and the cost of silence. As Hollywood grew more polarized, Tom Hanks's carefully maintained neutrality began to be read not as restraint, but as judgment. For some, his silence felt like quiet superiority, a refusal to get his hands dirty while benefiting from the system's moral spotlight. Roseanne Barr was among the loudest critics. Never subtle and rarely diplomatic, she took repeated swipes at what she described as Hollywood's elite hypocrisy. Though she did not always name Hanks directly, her comments about sanitized heroes and approved faces were widely interpreted as aimed at figures like him. Barr believed that Hollywood punished outspoken dissent while rewarding those who played the moral role convincingly. To her, Hanks symbolized that imbalance. He never responded, which only hardened her stance. In Barr's worldview, silence was not grace. It was complicity. Kirstie Alley's conflict was shaped overtly by politics. A vocal conservative in an industry she believed leaned overwhelmingly progressive, Alley grew increasingly frustrated with celebrities who, in her view, used their platforms selectively. Insiders recall industry events where tension between Alley and Hanks was palpable, marked by avoidance rather than confrontation. Alley's social media posts grew more pointed over time, criticizing unnamed actors who, she claimed, hid behind popularity while enforcing ideological conformity. Many assumed Hanks was among her targets. The divide was not personal affection versus dislike. It was belief versus image, and neither side showed interest in compromise. Mel Gibson's resentment cut even deeper. Having watched his own career unravel under controversy, Gibson reportedly viewed Hanks as the embodiment of Hollywood's double standard. Friends of Gibson claim he believed that the industry forgives some sins and condemns others based on optics rather than substance. Hanks's pristine reputation, reinforced by charitable appearances and family-friendly roles, became, in Gibson's mind, evidence of a system that valued appearance over complexity. Gibson openly criticized Hollywood's obsession with clean narratives, implying that actors like Hanks benefited from a moral economy rigged in their favor. Again, Hanks did not reply. The man who never answered back. By the time all these names were whispered, hinted at, or openly spoken, one pattern had become impossible to ignore. No matter who criticized him, questioned him, or expressed resentment toward him, Tom Hanks never responded in kind. He did not clarify. He did not defend. He did not counterattack. He simply continued working. To some, that restraint confirmed everything admirable about him. To others, it felt calculated, a form of power so complete that it did not need to speak. When Henry Winkler lost his position, Hanks said nothing. When Tim Allen distanced himself, Hanks said nothing. When filmmakers questioned his artistic safety, when comedians mocked his image, when political opponents accused him of hypocrisy, the response remained the same. Silence. In Hollywood, silence is rarely neutral. It can function as insulation. It allows controversy to burn itself out while reputation remains intact. Over time, Tom Hanks's absence from public feuds became part of his mythology. He was seen as the adult in the room, the figure who refused to engage in pettiness. But to those who felt sidelined, overshadowed, or judged by the system he symbolized, that silence felt dismissive rather than noble. What makes this story tragic is not that Tom Hanks is secretly cruel, manipulative, or malicious. There is no evidence of that. The tragedy lies in how power distorts perception. When one person becomes the industry's moral center, disagreement starts to look like ingratitude. Criticism sounds like bitterness, and those who speak up are framed as troublemakers rather than participants in a legitimate conversation. Many of the people linked to tension with Hanks never accused him directly of wrongdoing. Instead, they described atmospheres, dynamics, and imbalances, moments where they felt smaller, quieter, or easier to replace. Their resentment was not always about him as a man, but about what he represented, a version of Hollywood that rewards comfort, consistency, and silence over confrontation. Tom Hanks continues to be celebrated, honored, and trusted. His films still carry emotional authority. His public image remains largely untouched. But beneath that stability exists a long, quiet list of people who walked away feeling unseen, unheard, or displaced. So, what do you think? Is Tom Hanks a class act who chose dignity over drama, or did his silence allow resentment to grow unchecked behind the scenes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into Hollywood's hidden tensions, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us.